Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Bea and this is where I talk about knitting and crochet, and today I want to talk about my trend predictions for 2026. So specifically I want to talk about my trend predictions within knitting and crochet, which obviously moves at a slightly different pace from traditional fashion trends. I think it tends to, both crafts have their own micro trends that pop up. Some of the trends I'm going to talk about are trends that I think are going to happen for both of them. Some of them more for one than the other. I always enjoy thinking about these things. I always kind of like the end of the year and the beginning of a new year where you can kind of see what the colour of the year is going to be, see what the trend spotters are predicting, see what Pinterest is coming up with their trend report, all of that stuff. So this is my personal take. I have got things right in the past, I've got things wrong in the past. It's not an exact science, at least not for me. I know that there are some companies that are claiming that you can accurately predict trends down to the minute it's going to launch, but for me these are just more like feelings and vibes I'm getting. Oh, I'm wearing the Nordic Bloom vest by Caitlin Hunter. I sometimes get those questions. Alright, so a quick one to kick us off, because I've already talked about this quite extensively. Carnival. So I'm mentioning this because it was one of the micro trends I highlighted at the end of last year when I made a video about some of the micro trends I was enjoying in knitting, and I said at the time I felt like it was already developing as a trend, like it was already here. And then Pinterest have put, well, I predicted Jester, Pinterest have called it Carnival, and they've put it in as one of their trend predictions for the year. And I think I can go into all my theories about it again, but also you can just check the comments on that other video, which I will link below. And I would actually say the comments on that video are more interesting than my insights in the video. There are some people who went into such amazing detail about why Carnival and kind of clowncore and the Jester might be having a moment now based on historically what the reaction has been to political turmoil, based on the political turmoil we're in now. It's a super interesting one. I recommend paying more attention to them than to me. I'm also going to be showing pictures to illustrate these trends as I go through, and I'll put the name up. I think, but because a lot of these are future predictions, I don't always have the ideal pattern to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So some of these might be illustrated with older patterns, but I think we're going to see more of it in the next year. And there's one trend in particular that I will not be featuring any patterns for because I do not want to promote it as a trend, and I hope it does not catch on. A trend that I am excited to see if it catches on is large headscarves, because I think, you know, we had the Sophie scarf and the tiny scarves are having a moment, and then Petite Knits come out with a bigger triangle kind of mini shawl scarf, which I've seen a lot of people casting on. So I'm talking about full head coverage, the little kind of babushka style, and I think that this is partly an evolution of what we've seen in the whole kind of scarf, shawl, shawlette world, where there was the Sophie scarf and suddenly everyone was wearing things that were just like basically like long and thin. We've seen Petite Knit increasingly release bigger and bigger versions of it. Every designer seems to have a layering scarf at the minute. But we've also seen hoods be such a thing. We've seen the Scooty or the scarf hoodie be a thing. And I think that I'm seeing more and more of these bigger scarves coming through. And I think that it's kind of those trends meeting in the middle. People love a bonnet, people love a hood. This is a new version of that, but also it's a way for the shawl knitters among us to kind of like repurpose some of their shawls. We're seeing a lot of intricate lace work, which is going to be another trend I talk about. So I think that it's just the natural progression of these things. We're also just having a freezing winter. Europe in particular, man, like it's just a lot. And I think people are looking for, yeah, a smaller scarf is cute in the spring and autumn, but right now in particular, I think people are looking for like, okay, but how do I get big coverage? And I think that this big headscarf trend is going to feed into another trend as well, which I think we're going to see a lot of lace panels. And I think that this one is for knitting and crochet. If you're a crocheter, you know that we've been seeing lace panels for a while. There's been a lot of like skirts, which are just a lace panel tied around the waist. There's been a lot of tops, which is just lace tied at the back. But I think we're going to see it in knitting as well. And I think this partly comes from how scarves seem to be getting bigger again. We're seeing so many designers pulling on the Japanese stitching Bible, which obviously has these beautiful, intricate lace patterns. But also one of the kind of fashion commentators, trend predictors I follow on here is Katie Robinson, and she did a really, really great kind of trend prediction video, which I really recommend. And one of the people she was talking to really highlighted how a lot of the fashion houses are now doing lace panels, specifically not lace shirts or garments, but panels. And they pointed out Acme in particular recently sent a load of lace panels down the runway. Lace to a non-lace knitter like myself looks complicated, but from what I understand about lace knitting and from a lot of lace knitters I know, it's actually fairly quick, easy, satisfying project to work up a big lace panel. Obviously the more detailed you go, the more elaborate it is. Same with crochet, and I think that it's such a nice way to showcase work. So I think we're going to see a bit more of that. So here's a trend that I am not going to show any images for because I really hope it does not catch on. At the same time, I think it's already happening. I think we're going to see the return of Harry Potter in knitting and crochet circles. My reasons for this are every year, and I have actually been keeping track of this on Ravelry, the number of Harry Potter patterns released on Ravelry goes down every year. But at the same time, we've got two things happening. We've got a new Harry Potter series coming out this year, and with the whole kind of MAGA Trump government that we've got in the US, and obviously a lot of kind of pushback we've got here in the UK as well with reform, the right is on the rise in a lot of countries, and there is a general pushback against what is perceived as cancel culture. And with that comes a kind of re-embracing of people who in my mind were never cancelled. Like, yeah, for me, as an ardent Harry Potter fan who loved the books and loved the series and was really, really into it and met a lot of friends through the Harry Potter fandom, I had to kind of like let go of any love or involvement in J.K. Rowling's work quite a long time ago. And for me, the big one for her was that when she said that people who bought her books and bought the Harry Potter IP, she took that as confirmation that people agreed with her anti-trans views, and she has since been using her money to fund anti-trans legislation in the UK. And to me, that was like, hard no, she is cancelled. But for the majority of the public, I don't think she's been cancelled, to be honest. And she's definitely still had a platform, still had a lot of sway, still had lots of people engaging with her work. But it's recently that I've started seeing it a lot more on Reddit, on Instagram, people posting Harry Potter stuff. There is always pushback on this, and people get downvoted for these projects, and people like comment and say things like, you know, she's like actively making the life of trans people worse. She is actively through the courts pursuing trans people and trying to remove their rights. But I think a lot of people, it doesn't really matter. They like the books, they want to keep doing it. The TV show is coming out. There's a pushback against cancel culture. There's an idea that you should be able to divorce the art from the artist, which to be fair, I do agree with. And this is a book I'm actually reading at the minute, which really talks about the need to divorce the art from the artist and what do we do with like good art by bad people kind of thing. It adds a lot of nuance. It's really interesting. I really recommend it. But that's the kind of side thing, because basically what I think is happening, Harry Potter aesthetic is pretty timeless. People are always going to like many visual aspects of the series. People are feeling more emboldened to be more upfront about their love of Harry Potter, and I think we're going to see a lot more patterns. I think we're going to see a lot more of this aesthetic. We might see Harry Potter coded projects that are not actually labelled as Harry Potter. Like we might see more Niffler amigurumi that aren't called Nifflers but are called like moles. We might see a lot of kind of wizard core stuff coming through, but overall I think we're just like to see a lot more Harry Potter. So that's depressing. But on to the next one, which is a bit more fun. So I'm calling it Nostalgia Kids. This was another Pinterest prediction, and it's been backed up by quite a few recent releases of patterns, I think. So here are some examples of the patterns I've been seeing. This is definitely knitting and crochet. I think so much of the nostalgia, it's kind of like 1970s, 80s North American knitwear, I think, although there was definitely a lot of this going around the UK as well. And I've also seen some people talking about Scandi nostalgia childhood knits as well. Fun, vibrant, bold patterns, clear shapes. A lot of it was knitted, but I think it really lends itself to crochet as well, especially Intarsia. We've been kind of seeing it come through for a while, but it looks like this is the year it's going to be the big thing. And I think that is partly because, you know, escapism is going to be very powerful and very important for people this year. Like it was important last year, it's going to be even more important this year. I think people are actively going to be looking to the past, looking to kind of what they might perceive as the good old days, and just looking for escapism, looking for fun in what they're creating. Next one. So last year I made a prediction about the colour of the year, which was mocha mousse, and I said I didn't think it was really going to take off. Like I thought maybe shades of brown would be more of a thing, but that one in particular I didn't think was going to take off, and for the most part I don't think it has. The colour for this year it's bright white or something, and I think it's going to be big. And I think it's going to be big partly for a lot of the reasons that I didn't think mocha mousse is going to be a thing, in that it's great for showing stitch definition, and I think it's going to be popular in knitting and crochet, particularly in crochet. I think because I think we are going to see a bit more lace happening as well, and I think obviously the white is really, really great for that. And I also think that there's always push and pull between trends. There's always people who go for the maximalist trend, there's always people who go for the minimalist trend. So many of the trends I'm talking about, particularly the one just done, nostalgia kids, but also got a few coming up which are very kind of like bright, in your face, maximalist. There are always going to be people who go to the opposite side of that and go for something extremely sleek, monochrome, neutral even. So yeah, we always get people pushing back against the maximalist trend, and I think the bright white trend is the way to go. And the thing is, I love a lot of these maximalist colourful trends, but I've got 4 different projects in variations of this bright white on the needles at the minute, and I don't even wear that much white. And I bought this wool 3-4 months ago. So I have definitely been influenced. I'm not saying this like I'm a trendsetter, I'm saying it like I'm a trend follower, and I think that it's going to be popular and it's going to be embraced, I think, quite broadly. But with that, I think we're also going to see a lot of red and blue. Mainly what I'm seeing it in is knitting, and some of these patterns are going to be familiar that I'm showing up and have been popular for a few years, but I think we're going to see a lot more white with detailed red and blue colour work. It's going to, you know, we're seeing a lot of the kind of the Nordic stuff and styles coming through in this. I think we're going to see more and more highly detailed kind of Scandi style blocks, basically, which I think plugs into the next trend, which is I think we're going to see a lot of national knits. And I think that's mainly going to be in knitting, because knitting tends to have a lot more kind of like national country aligned techniques. You know, you've got the Italian bind off, you've got the German cast on, you've got various other ones which I'm going to put on screen, and you've also got distinct knitting styles from different countries where, you know, you can show me something that's, you know, a kind of Ukrainian knitwear designer and it looks to me significantly different to, say, a Scandinavian designer, which looks in turn different to a French knitwear designer. Whereas with crochet, I couldn't be as precise if something has like a kind of country of origin, apart from obviously things like Irish lace. And I think we're going to see this, and I think that the white, red and blue is literally just because that is in a lot of flags. And I think people are going to be looking for subtle ways to show patriotism. And I think that's partly because the tariffs have forced people to think about where their yarn comes from and to source more locally. We're definitely seeing it in a lot of the North American knitters. We're seeing it with the Canadian knitters in terms of when the US government started talking so aggressively about Canada, there was definitely like a surge in kind of like patriotism and national pride there and everything. And I think you saw a lot more people being like, buy Canada, focus on Canada. I think that the tariffs have forced a lot of the US knitters to start thinking about, okay, how can I get American yarn, you know, and like thinking more about buying locally and how to avoid tariffs and just understanding more where their yarn comes from. But in Europe as well, absolutely, like the number of brands that I'm no longer buying because they originate in the US and I just don't want to deal with tariffs. I've got a lot more picky about where I get my yarn from. This is kind of coming through in, I think we're seeing a lot more like local techniques. One example of this, there have been a few, but thrumming, for example. I've seen, particularly in North America, people who have ancestors from countries that employ thrumming techniques seem to be making more thrumming things. We're seeing an increase in patterns with that, and we're seeing a lot more people reference their own heritage in terms of the patterns that they are choosing to make. You know, things like, oh yeah, I have Danish family, or my family's from Denmark, so I'm making this pattern because of this Danish designer. I think that we're seeing more of that. And I also think that what we're going to start seeing is as conflicts increase, obviously there's the Ukrainian conflict, but there's also, you know, what's happened in Venezuela recently. People are feeling less secure, I think, in the kind of like secure within their own countries. And I think that in turn, the US starting to kind of look in almost like predatory way at South American countries, I think we're going to see people be a lot more kind of like wanting to show support for their nation, wanting to show patriotism and everything. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think it might potentially even lead to a bit more diversity in the kind of patterns we see and the kind of techniques that are used. And that was another quite grim one. So let's go for a really fun one at the end, which I'm hopeful about and very excited to see, which is on the Pinterest trends list, and they're calling it Gummy. So basically just gummy sweets, gummy bears. A lot of it's obviously kind of like, I would expect to almost see it more in like jewelry making circles, like resin casting and things like that. But I think it really lends itself to crochet as well. The reason I'm expecting to see it a bit more with crochet is that crochet as a structure just lends itself so much more to this. You know, you can get a much more solid, firm structure with crochet. You can have a lot of fun. I don't know if it's going to be super literal, where people might be making like scarves in the shape of boiled sweets, things like that, or if it's just going to be more the colours and the shapes that are adopted. But at the same time, I think the sailor slippers with the stripes that almost look like sweets to me, like licorice all sorts or something, or like humbugs. I think that we're seeing a lot more kind of like sweetie kind of coded patterns coming through. It links to the nostalgia kids idea of that people are going to want escapism and want fun. But yeah, I think it could be a really, really fun one, a really good way to use colour. And it's another one, if we look at how some people are really struggling to source yarn, cost of living crisis is really hitting here in the UK, definitely. It's the kind of trend you can hop on and do some fun stuff with without having to invest a lot in yarn. That you can do it with relatively small amounts. So that might make it quite popular as well. All right, those are all my trend predictions for now. I tend to have about a 50% hit rate with this stuff, so maybe some of it's not going to come through, maybe some of it's already happened, maybe some of it will happen next year, who knows. But it's been fun thinking through it all, even if some of these are a bit depressing. I tend to get quite a few comments on these videos about how I'm too political or I'm reading politics too much into crafting, but the fact is everything is connected. I think we saw it last year more than ever with the whole tariff situation and how that affected how people can source their yarn. I think we're going to see it this year in terms of how people source their patterns and what they choose to make. And whatever happens, I think it's going to be an interesting time to be a crafter in, and I can't wait to see what people come up with. All right, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, just do whatever you want. Bye.